Howdy, folks. We're going to do a quick kind of extension of the previous lecture. And so we are still in the midst of using patterns to identify the types of a chemical reaction, right? And we're not quite to the point where we want to confidently predict products of chemical reactions yet. We're still looking at reaction types. Now, so far, right, we just introduced these 5 reaction types: combination, synthesis, decomposition, etc. Right? And what we're in the midst of doing is trying to use patterns, right, to identify what type of reaction is taking place. Now, the reason this is important, right, is eventually we want to be able to predict what happens when we put certain chemicals together in the right circumstances. What will we make? How much will we make? That's kind of the crux of chemistry, using what we can understand about chemical interactions to make accurate predictions. Because we need accurate predictions so that, for example, they can make aspirin without killing you, right, or other medications, so that the materials they put in the packaging of your food, right, doesn't produce toxins that are harmful to you, right, so that we can understand these things, right? So a context we're going to use that's very real to us is air and water pollution, right? Air and water pollution are created due to various types of chemical reactions. So what types of chemical reactions occur in our air and water, and why would that matter to you in the first place? All right. Now, in Walla Walla, luckily, by and large, we enjoy some pretty good air quality in our area. That's because we're fairly rural, so there's not a ton of vehicles choking up our roadways all the time, continuously spewing pollutants into our air. We don't really have any major industrial sources. Boise Cascade is probably the closest example we have of something that's continuously putting out some air pollutants. Right? And then we're also lucky in that here on the West Coast we have an abundance of both wind and hydropower. And are therefore able to produce power without any air pollution, unlike on the East Coast where they use a lot of like coal, for example. All right, but we don't always enjoy really good air quality in Walla Walla, right? So this is kind of a normal, especially in the springtime. You know, granted there is a lot of pollen in the air, which can be problematic for those of you with allergies, and pollen actually is considered an air pollutant. But by and large, we're pretty lucky in our area to enjoy some good air quality. And that's kind of the case in much of the western U.S. Now, Southern California might be a bit of an example where they often don't have great air quality. Now, if you guys will recall, though, you were all alive during this time, right? So it's nice to have some examples of things that you'll actually remember. So just about a year and a half ago, the late summer of 2018, right, we had a period here on the West Coast, but especially in places like Walla Walla, where we had some either unhealthy or very unhealthy air quality. And I'm thinking most of you guys will likely remember what the cause of that was. And that was the rather nasty wildfire season that we had around here. Right? And so it is worth pointing out that not all air pollution is caused by, directly at least, by human sources, right? There's lots of natural air pollutants, and you guys should have seen that in that other little video you watched, right? But I think it's important to have some context. Now, other times we don't enjoy the greatest air quality is, again, if you lived in Walla Walla for a few years, you have experienced those periods of time where in the winter time, deep winter, where the fog settles in and just doesn't seem to go away. That really persistent fog is actually resulting from what's called air stagnation. That's where the air basically gets stuck down in our valley and doesn't move, and that allows pollutants to slowly build up over time. So they often give what's called an air stagnation advisory during those times. And we'd probably be in the moderate to slightly unhealthy area for air quality during those times. We don't really get into this area until a really bad wildfire season. But moving forward, we got 2 terms we're going to differentiate: primary and secondary air pollutants. If any of you have had environmental science, you already know what these terms mean, right? But quickly, a primary pollutant is a pollutant that's emitted directly from a pollution source. So your automobile, for example, is a pollution source. Anything that is emitted by your automobile, right, is considered a primary pollutant, right? Now, remember, those primary pollutants can come from human sources or natural sources, so a volcanic eruption or dust from a field or smoke from a fire. Those could be natural sources, right? But most of what we're concerned with are human sources. And the way we can think about our primary pollutants are we are introducing new reactants into nature, right? So we should already know what that term reactant means. Now, a secondary pollutant, right, is simply something that forms from a chemical reaction involving primary pollutants. So again, we have the pollutants that are emitted directly from a source, be that an automobile or a volcano or a factory or a power plant, right? Those are reactants, right? So we have our reactants on the left, right? Those pollutants can undergo chemical reactions to produce new pollutants that we call secondary pollutants. And the secondary pollutants would be like the products of a chemical reaction. All right? Excuse me. So that's kind of the gist of the new information I want you guys to have. We want to be able to know what we're talking about when we say primary pollutant. Those are like the reactants. Those come directly from a source. And what we're talking about when we say secondary pollutants, those are like the products. And those form because primary pollutants can undergo chemical reactions in the atmosphere or in our water to produce new materials that are also considered pollutants. All right, what you guys are going to do today is there's an assignment posted. It's mostly a review of reaction types. It's just within the context of pollutants. So there's the chemical reactions and environmental pollution document posted that's already had a copy made for you. You'll be given 6 scenarios of various types of environmental pollution, right? And your job is to look at the chemical reaction and decide what type it is and then submit that, and you will be done for the week, right? After which you guys, of course, will have that little Google form exit ticket. All right, that is it for today. Adios.